Imagine this. Your heart stops. Doctors call it you're clinically dead. And then you're floating near the ceiling, watching your own body from above. You feel a presence, a light, a wave of peace so overwhelming that everything you've ever feared about dying just disappears. Then you wake up. This isn't science fiction. This has happened to millions of people. And in the last few years, scientists have started recording what actually happens inside the brain in those final moments. And the results are stranger and more reassuring than anyone expected. So what is it actually like to die? Stick around, because the answer might change how you think about death forever. These experiences are called near-death experiences, or NDEs, moments of bodily disconnection, intense emotion, and what feels like a glimpse beyond. And here's the thing, they're not rare. One recent survey found that 15% of intensive care patients reported having one. That's not a fringe phenomenon, that's potentially millions of people worldwide. NDEs also aren't new. Researchers have found accounts of them across history and cultures, from 7th century BC China to 19th century Ghana. Some historians even believe Hieronymus Bosch's famous 16th century painting, Ascent of the Blessed, is a visual depiction of an NDE, a tunnel of light, figures rising toward a glowing void. The modern scientific interest took off in the 1970s, when psychologist Raymond Moody published Life After Life, collecting dozens of similar stories. Leaving the body, traveling through a tunnel, seeing a bright light, reviewing your life, and feeling overwhelming peace. But personal stories are one thing. What does the science actually say? Before we get to the brain scans, let's hear what this actually feels like, in people's own words. Leanda Pringle from Connecticut had an NDE during a severe kidney infection. She described floating above her body, feeling like she was everywhere and nowhere at the same time. Then she felt a presence approach. As it got closer, I began to feel immense bliss, she said. It was as if I was intertwined with it, but at the same time it felt like it was hugging me. Tommy McDowell, a retired Army veteran, spent 7 days on a ventilator after organ failure caused by sepsis. During that time, he experienced what he called a transformational presence of peace, comfort, serenity, love, and home. He says he felt trauma and regret physically washing away from his body. Both of them describe the same thing, an encounter so powerful, words struggle to capture it. And both say it permanently changed how they see life and death. So, is this the soul leaving the body? Or is something else going on? In 2024, researchers at the University of Michigan did something remarkable. They recorded brain activity using EEG from 4 dying patients on life support. What they found shocked even the researchers. In 2 of the patients, right after life support was withdrawn, there was a sudden surge of brain activity in the gamma frequency range, the same brain waves linked to consciousness. This surge was centered at the junction of the temporal and parietal lobes, a region near the back of the brain involved in conscious awareness. There was also a spike in connectivity with the prefrontal cortex, the area tied to decision-making and self-awareness. In other words, as these patients were dying, their brains weren't shutting down quietly. They were lighting up in patterns that look a lot like conscious thought. Scientists had seen this kind of end-of-life surge before, but only in rats. This was the first strong evidence it happens in humans too. Neuropsychologist Dr. Charlotte Marshall, who studies NDEs at the Coma Science Group in Belgium, called the findings extremely intriguing. She believes this surge of activity could be exactly what produces the vivid, dream-like experiences NDE survivors describe. But there's a catch. These patients didn't survive. So we'll never know if they actually experienced anything or what it felt like. Here's another piece of the puzzle, and it comes from rats. Researchers studied rats experiencing asphyxia, essentially the same oxygen loss that happens during a heart attack. What they found was a massive flood of brain chemicals, dopamine, glutamate, GABA, and more. But one chemical stood out, serotonin. Within just 2 minutes of oxygen loss, serotonin levels spiked to 20 times normal. Why does this matter? because serotonin and chemicals like it are deeply involved in emotion, perception, and dreamlike states. And here's where it gets really interesting. Scientists tested this idea using DMT, a powerful psychedelic sometimes called the spirit molecule. Volunteers who took DMT reported experiences strikingly similar to NDEs, leaving their bodies, seeing bright lights, feelings of cosmic connection. The theory? In life-threatening situations, the brain might release its own version of these psychedelic compounds, flooding the system with chemicals that produce these profound, otherworldly experiences. So maybe the white light isn't heaven, it's chemistry. But not everyone agrees that's the whole story. Right up until his death in 2024, the renowned neuropsychiatrist Peter Fenwick, one of the most respected voices in this field, remained convinced something more was going on. To him, NDEs were evidence the human mind exists beyond the brain. Professor Emerita Janice Holden, a former president of the International Association for Near-Death Studies, argues the neuroscience is too simple. A brief spike in brain chemicals, she says, can't explain the incredibly complex, structured experiences people describe. She also points to so-called verified perceptions, cases where people reported accurately witnessing events happening in another room while their body was unconscious. One famous case involves a patient who reportedly described in detail a leg amputation occurring in a nearby operating room while they were under anesthesia. Even Dr. Marshall admits this remains an open question. The non-local consciousness hypothesis remains a possibility, she says, one we're currently testing. In other words, the debate over whether this is purely the brain or something more is far from settled. Here's what almost everyone agrees on. NDEs change people, permanently. Survivors often report changes across 4 areas of their lives. Psychologically, they lose their fear of death, become less materialistic, and care more about others and the planet. Spiritually, they develop a much deeper interest in spiritual life, regardless of their religion before. Physically, changes in sleep, appetite, and sensitivity to light, sound, and medication. And socially, many even change careers, friendships, or relationships to better match their new outlook on life. Researchers in Barcelona even tested this in virtual reality, putting people through a simulated death experience, complete with an out-of-body moment, a life review, and a tunnel of light. Compared to a control group, participants came out more selfless, less materialistic, and less afraid of death. Some experts argue hospitals should do more to support patients after an NDE, because right now, many are dismissed, disbelieved, or even referred to psychiatric care simply for describing what happened to them. So, what is it actually like to die? Maybe it's a final, beautiful surge of brain activity, a last flood of chemicals creating the most vivid experience of your life. Or maybe it's something more, a glimpse of consciousness existing beyond the body. Science doesn't have the full answer yet, but here's what we do know. For the people who've been there and come back, it wasn't terrifying. For most, it was peace, light, love, and a sense that they weren't alone. As one survivor put it, "After that experience, my life will never be the same." If this video gave you something to think about, hit subscribe, because we're going to keep exploring the biggest questions science still can't fully answer.